Hey there, welcome to the Posit Data Science Hangout. I'm Libby Heron, and this is a recording of our weekly community call that happens every Thursday at 12 p.m. US Eastern Time. If you are not joining us live, you miss out on the amazing chat that's going on. So find the link in the description where you can add our call to your calendar and come hang out with the most supportive, friendly, and funny data community you'll ever experience. Can't wait to see you there. I am so excited to welcome our guest today. It's Josh Starmer of StatQuest. Hi, Josh. I would love it if you could introduce yourself to everybody if they don't already know you.
I'm so happy to be right here today, talking with the data science meetup with my favorite company, people at Posit. Makes my software that I use every day. Hooray! Hello. I'm,
Hello. Oh, look at all the hearts coming through. I see so many smiling and laughing faces too in my camera on crew. Thank you so much, Josh. Everybody, if you don't know Josh, Josh has millions of followers on YouTube and he runs a YouTube channel called StatQuest that if you are a statistics person like me who was ever in school and kind of terrified of some of your statistics topics, you probably found Josh's channel to get friendly introductions to complicated topics. Josh, I would love it if you could give us a short rundown on who you are and how you got to the YouTube space and kind of what the ethos of your channel is.
yeah, so hello, I'm Josh Starmer. Um, my background is in music and computing. I kind of always have loved them both. Um, the computing has often paid better and had better hours, so I've focused a lot of my professional life on that side, and I have a strong musical hobby. I golly, I took a statistics class in graduate school, and I fell in love with statistics, even though the class was absolutely horrible. It's like one of the worst classes I've ever taken, but it opened my eyes to things, to think about things in ways I'd never thought about them before, even though these are obvious things. Like it's kind of like I almost feel embarrassed to say that before I took statistics, I'd never really thought about variation. I never really thought about like, oh, we can quantify. I mean, I knew that like snowflakes were all different, but I didn't know we could quantify variation, and I didn't know we had tools out there that could help us make sense of that variation and help us make good decisions with it. And that's what I fell in love with was this realization that like yes, everything's different all the time, and I can use that information to my advantage. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. Because up until then, whenever I'd done math had always resulted in a a point estimate was what we call in statistics land. You know, like a single number was be the result, and I was always like, well, that's the way math is. And then statistics was like, no, it's not. This is reality. This is the world. This is not heaven. And I was like, okay. And I just love that. And so but I'll be honest with you. So statistics, even though it was a terrible class, um, I've always struggled with it as a subject. It's even, you know, struggling with that very first concept of like, oh, there's this thing called variation that we can quantify. That was hard for me, but everything's been hard for me. And so I kind of started creating, for many different reasons, I started creating a YouTube channel as a way to teach myself statistics in a way that made sense to me. I'm very visual, and I'm not someone who can just look at an equation and go, "Ah, oh, that makes sense." I have to break it down into sort of a visual interpretation, and then I can go back to the equation and go, "Oh, this part of the equation corresponds to this part of this illustration," or something like that, and I can understand it that way. And my video is my way of sort of teaching myself, but also not to skip too much of the background in this short introduction. I worked in a genetics lab doing data analysis for a long time, for 13 years, and I created the channel also to teach them and my coworkers sort of that what I was doing wasn't magic. And I can talk for hours and hours and hours about this, so I'll
Lila,
leave it
I'll
at for
stop you. I'll save you.
now.
I absolutely like the things that I want to call out from that to highlight are that you struggled with anything at all, right? Because I think that people look at your YouTube channel, they look at people who they think just know a lot of stuff, and they think this person must just get it easily. It's so wonderful to hear you say, I am good at explaining this because it's hard, because I had to work through understanding it myself, and now I'm just sending that forward, right? The only other thing I wanted to ask to make sure, maybe you said this and I missed it,
Uh-huh.
was this was not your dream job, right? What was it that you really wanted to do? Where were you before this?
Well, I either wanted to be a rock star or
Well,
if
you
that's
are now. You achieved.
and I actually I succeeded at that and realized it was not the job I wanted. But the other job I wanted was I wanted to be a professor at a university, and I specifically wanted to have a laboratory that focused on sort of mathematical biology, did computer simulations of biology and organisms and organs as a way to prevent having to use animals as test subjects. I was like, what if we can have computer programs as test subjects? Can we model the biology accurately enough that we can use that instead of animals for understanding toxicity or whatever? And so that, and I had that dream. I can't. It's like a weird dream, but I think part of the dream came from me when I was like 6 or 7 years old, misinterpreting what my dad did for a living because I wanted to do what my dad did. But and he kind of told me once, and I didn't really understand it. So I came up with this own vision, and that really appealed to me. Like I thought it was his vision as well, but turned out not to be. But but I was like, oh, that is what I want to do. So ever since I've as long as I can remember, that's something I wanted to do. But eventually, for better and for worse, is something I had to say goodbye to. Because I'm a terrible grant writer and much better at making YouTube videos, it turns out.
The horrible reality of academia is that
Yeah.
you're actually sometimes just a grant writer. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people here could probably identify with that. Well, I wanted to hop right into the Slido and
Yeah.
start with a question from Mike K. Smith. Mike had a fantastic question about videos. Would you like to ask that live, Mike?
Yeah, I'm sorry, this isn't a stats question. It's much more of a YouTube-y, video-y question. But um, I'd love to do more in terms of video training and stuff like that on various topics.
Mhm.
But the editing and the kind of post-production side of things takes so much time. So have you got any top tips on how to kind of make it so that it's a little easier or shorten that time from idea to full final video?
I really wish I could. That would make my life so much better too.
There's no shortcut.
I don't. I'm just terrible. The way I make my videos is so primitive. I just make a PowerPoint presentation, or I use a program called Keynote, but it's essentially a free knockoff of PowerPoint. And I just export the slides and I import them into iMovie and I just record my overdubs. And it's a long process and it takes forever. And I don't, but I've been doing it for so long, so many years, um, that it's just that when I sit down, it's what I expect to do. And so it never dawned on me that I could do something else or make it faster. So yeah, unfortunately I can't give you a good answer for that.
I think that that's a fantastic answer because oh, there's no shortcut actually. Editing is just really hard. And if you get fancier editing tools, they crash all the time. And they won't just crash themselves, they'll crash your entire computer. My husband is a video producer and he's the most patient person on the planet. I don't know, I don't know how he does it. I will throw a shout out there for Snagit, which is what I use to record code reviews and stuff and tutorials. I really love it. It's like just enough tools to do the stuff that I want to do and like annotate my screen and have me in the bottom in like a cute little shape without it being overwhelming with so many options. So if you happen to like Snagit, I see some plus ones for Snagit in the chat. Go for it. It's worth it. It's by TechSmith, the same company that makes Camtasia. If you really want more fully fleshed out editing, then you could do Camtasia. Crashes on me all the time too, though. All right. Thank you so much for the question, Mike. Let's head back over to Slido for a question from Dylan. Dylan Polson. You would ask a question in the Slido. Would you like to ask that live? And everybody, don't forget to put your name on your question so I can ask you to ask it live. And if you can't ask it, just put a little asterisk or a note in there. I'll ask it for you.
Yeah, big fan, Josh. I am just so impressed with your ability to explain difficult concepts. I've taught a machine learning course and had students watch some of your videos, and then I think to myself, man, this could be explained to a high schooler. So I'm wondering if you could go through your process of how you take these really high difficulty concepts and turn them into something that's accessible for so many people.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So like I said, I'm a pretty slow learner, and so the first thing I have to do is sort of read everything I can about the subject. And I'll be honest, I specifically avoid trying to watch videos about subjects. I'm afraid if I watch another person's video, I'll copy them, and that's the last thing I want to do. Because if somebody else is already doing a great job the way they're teaching, then that's great. I want everyone to go to that video. I don't want them to come to mine, which is just an echo of that one. And so I try to avoid personally this, and it's just for personal reasons, because people always ask me like, what's your favorite YouTube channel for learning new concepts? And I'm like, I don't use any of them. But so I read everything I can. And then I try to, whatever it is, I try to come up with the simplest possible example that still highlights one key reason that whatever the method uh, is useful. So, for example, for when I made a video on neural networks can fit straight lines to things, but that's not very interesting because we've got linear regression. We got a million other tools that can fit straight lines to things. So what I wanted was to come up with the simplest example that could illustrate something that was a little more exciting. And so I came up with a data set that had 3 points that so one, a low point, a high point, and then going back down to a low point. So we had a non-linear sort of effect, and it just has 3 data points. And then I was like, what's the simplest neural network that I could come up with that will then fit a non-linear shape to that and accurately make predictions based on it? And this was actually very challenging because training a ridiculously simple neural network was non-trivial, because I kept getting stuck in it when I was trying to find the optimal parameters for it. I kept getting stuck in really bad local minimum, and I just had to write a program that would just change the seed for random numbers. It's because neural networks start off with random numbers associated for the parameters, and then it optimizes from those random numbers. And so I had to I write a program that just iterated through different seed numbers, like for thousands, until I finally found a combination of parameters that would work. And what was cool about this, what the goal was to come up with something where everything could be visualized, and I could do all the math in front of people, and there was no sort of mystery, and there was no just sort of like this matrix times this matrix equals this matrix, and just sort of, which is cool and awesome and compact notation, but it's harder to glean sort of exactly what's going on if you can't follow the math one step at a time. Um, and so I succeeded. And what was nice is this neural network had one input, which was corresponded to the x-axis on a graph, and it had one output, which corresponded to a y-axis on a graph. And so for every x-axis value, I could look at the corresponding y-axis value, and we could actually see exactly what was happening. We could see how two different shapes, two different curves were getting added together to end up with this nice bell-shaped curve that fit the training data. And it took a long time to come up with that. And I'm probably giving you infinitely more details than you actually need right now. But the idea in general is that I do struggle to come up with as simple an example as I possibly can think of. And that's actually probably the hardest part of what I do, is coming up with an example. It's like, and I'm always challenging myself. Can I make it simpler? Is there something I can remove from this? Is there more of an essence that I can extract from that equation that really just gets at just the important things? And I'm always asking myself those questions. So,
That's the
uh,
best. Yeah. That
uh,
like, how can I make this simpler?
yeah.
Use that for your reprexes. How can I make this reprex simpler? And then by doing that, you'll probably answer your own question, won't you?
Yeah.
That was a fantastic question. Thank you so, so much. And I love the breakdown of like this took a really long time. That's such an empathetic thing to say, wow, this took me a really long time to understand. These are the things that really helped me figure it out. And I'm going to take the time, you know, in the beginning, like for free, out of the goodness of my heart, to like make this whole video explaining this so people understand. That just makes my heart glow. I love it so much. All right. Thank you so much for the question. We're going to head over to a question from Edward. Edward Clayton Leland. Would you like to ask your question live?
Hello. Um,
Hi.
Hello.
so it's cool that you did your own like optimizer thing because I'm always like, ah, well, we have Adam. That's been made. We can optimize. But my question was, what's the most common statistical or machine learning mistake you see in real projects that doesn't show up in textbooks? Maybe it's people like me just being like, oh, Adam is invented. I don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I use Atom all the time, by the way. What's the most common mistake? Um, oh golly. That's a hard question for me to answer, and I'm a little embarrassed as to why. So, but I will tell you why it's hard for me. Um, and the issue is although I do think about these things all the time, I have it's been a long time since I've actually done it in practice or been around other people doing it in practice. And so I see, when I go places and I talk to people, I see what they're working on, but they don't give me all the details of things. Um, Although I don't know if this is a good answer to your question or not. It's not a good answer. I'm just going to change the subject. and the,
I think
and the
I
subject
think that
the subject I'm going to change it to is actually something I'm really proud of.
okay, good.
So I'm writing a book on statistics, and I'll be honest, I've been haunted by the assumptions of linear regression for probably the last 20 years. And the reason why I've been haunted by them so much is that I memorized them, but I never really understood them. I never I could repeat what they are, and I can repeat basically what they mean, but it's not something that's internal to my being. And when I wrote my book, I actually left them out. And the reason why I left them out is back in the don't tell anyone this, but back in my 13 years as a professional biostatistician, I often just ignored them because we just didn't have enough data to even care. So in practical settings, I know a lot of people freak out about all those assumptions, and for the most part, 9 times out of 10, your data is going to be fine. And don't worry about it. And so for a while I was like, I didn't even leave it. I did not include it in my book because I didn't want people to worry about something that in practical settings isn't actually worth worrying about that much. In rare settings, yes, sure, it's a big deal, but oftentimes for just really simple data sets, which is 99% of what at least the stuff I was doing was like, it was above and beyond like even possible. You just didn't have enough data to test all those things. So but in my book, I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased. I came up with a way to, at least for myself, that I can now look at data and just go, oh, I know that this is not a good data set for regression, and I can tell you exactly why. And I can point it out, and it just means these predictions in this region are going to be terrible. And I came up with a way to like feel it, and I no longer have to memorize these things. And instead, I can just look at the data and go, yeah, this is why, don't worry about it, or this is terrible. I don't know, I'm just super pleased with this sort of revelation. I overcame this thing that had been sort of like an itch I couldn't scratch for years and years and years, and I was like, I finally got it. So that's my pivot on your question of what people mess up. um,
That is okay. It is totally okay to pivot. And that was one of my questions that I sort of asked Josh when I first met him was like, Well, how do you keep up? Because I stopped doing data science and stopped, doing all of the stuff that was like hands-on practitioner work every single day in order to do this, right? To be here for the community. And that's something that Josh is doing too. He's like, I'm doing all of this for all of these people. So how do you keep up with the hands-on stuff? Is it a worry that you will like slip behind? You do personal projects?
Yeah, always. I'm always worried. And I've almost, so I used to work in a lab and I still go back to the lab on a fairly regular basis to present rough drafts of videos that I'm working on because they were my original audience back in the day. And they're still, I think they're the hardest people to explain because they basically hate the subject. And so they're just tough in so many ways. So if I can get something that they like, it's great. Um, but what do I need to do? Yeah, so that's I'm actually so my old boss, the boss that let me go because I was terrible at writing grants. We still actually get together. He's one of the best influences I've ever had in my life. He's the one that said, "Look, you are bad at writing grants, but you're good at this YouTube thing. You need to give it a try." And so he pushed me out of the lab, and I've instead of sinking, I was able to swim, and I owe a lot of that to him. Anyways, me and him are going to start doing some longitudinal data analysis in the spring. And I'm so excited about it because I've also wanted to do a series on time series longitudinal analysis techniques for forever. And so I'm just going to dive in it with him. He's got some data that he's been working on. So I'm going to get back into the game a little bit. And we'll see, we'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, I think everybody should get themselves a boss that will kick them out for their own good. That's a rare person.
Uh,
Um, all right. I have so many questions in Slido about books,
uh-huh.
book recommendations. I don't know if you have any, but let me sort of bring some of these together because there are so many. Like Satkar asked, what is the one book that you think every data science professional should read? Which is a great question. And let's definitely go with that one. What's the one book that every data science professional should read? But there were so many others that were like, what's the best book for somebody who's doing specific things like ML, specific things like AI development? What would you recommend as a book for data engineers or AI engineers? Um, so many that are along the same lines. So let's go with the one book if you had to choose one.
Yeah. So a shameless self promotion. I've written some books. And I've written two, and I've got a book on statistics coming out, and I absolutely adore my statistics book. I love it. But I also I've got a book on neural networks and AI, and I have a book on machine learning, and all of my books are just they're almost uh like like graphic novels. It's all pictures because I think in pictures. So I just draw pictures and then I annotate the pictures to kind of show you what's going on. So I do love my own books. I do have some good friends though that have written some great books that sort of depend on the field. I've been for the past 4 years. I've been in the AI ML world sphere, and I'm trying everything I can to get out of that sphere and get back into like hardcore statistics because to me, honest, I find that actually more interesting because the statistical methodologies are I just find them more interesting at a fundamental level. Whereas AI, I feel like a lot of AI is just optimization. Like, can we do this with less RAM? Can we do this faster? And those tricks I think are cool, but they're very ephemeral, right? Because 5 years from now, someone's going to even have a faster method and a better way of using RAM. But statistics has a way of being useful for a very long time. Like the discoveries that we make in statistics and the methodologies that we have staying power. And for that, I have a ton of respect for it, and that's why I'm trying to get back to it. So it's not just like the AI du jour type situation that I had been in. But I've got a lot of great recommendations of good AI books that I'm a big fan of. I've got my friends Jay Alamar and Martin. Oh, I can't remember his last name. They've written a fantastic book on how to use agents and how to use LLMs that I really like. And I've got a good friend, Louis Serrano, that's written a nice book on machine learning called Grokking Machine Learning or something. He always uses really great examples. Him and me, I actually like to do a lot of presentations with him because we're almost like complete opposites. But but I love that because because I learn a lot from him and he learns a lot from me, and I think between the two of us, pretty much anyone can learn anything if we're presenting it. So I don't actually have that too many book recommendations other than a shameless self promotion and some AI books.
That's all right. Well, I put the longest link ever in the chat to one of them. I found both of them, the grokking machine learning and then also the other one. So I put those in the chat if anybody would like. Oh, looks like Rachel's got a link in there too.
I
And if
wasn't sure if
anybody,
I had the right one, but I found an illustrated guide to AI agents. But it looks like it was the both the authors you mentioned.
Yeah. It's Jay Alama. Yeah, and Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they're awesome. Yeah, I think that one's coming out pretty, or maybe it's already out. It's brand new. Yeah,
I think
okay,
it's brand
cool.
new because I found their LinkedIn post talking about it coming out. So I'm
cool.
not sure if it's available yet.
Yeah.
The very long one that I linked to is Hands-on Large Language Models,
Oh yeah, that's
Language
great.
Understanding and Generation. Same authors.
Yep,
The
I like that.
kangaroo on the front. Okay, if you are watching this on YouTube later, these are going to be linked below. Do not panic. I'll put them in the resources for you.
Yeah,
Satkar, thank you so much for asking that question. Thank you to everybody who asked a book question. Put your recommendations in the chat so everybody else can see them too.
yeah.
Okay, we had an anonymous question that got the most upvotes of any question on Slido ever, and it was, what statistical concept do people think they understand, but almost always misuse in practice? This is another practice question. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Feel free to pivot.
Well, there's always the p-value, right? I mean, that's
That's what Nick
notorious
Drew said.
notoriously bad. And actually, interestingly enough, like confidence intervals are so bad that I just left them out of my book. I don't want them to be part of the conversation because even if you understand them, nobody else will. So just do everybody a favor and don't ever publish a confidence interval. That may be a controversial opinion, but I just think it's for the best. I just know that people will misinterpret that thing, and just don't do it. Let's just like start a new campaign. It's just like no more confidence intervals. Maybe I'll put I'll get a shirt that has a CI with like a line through it saying don't do it. Those are just notoriously awkward, and so
Yeah.
p values along those lines. A lot of people, even if people understand the p value and they know exactly what it means, they still treat it as if it's all you need to know. And you don't also need to know the effect size, right? Because if the effect
Mhm.
size is like minuscule, then it's who cares what the p-value is, right? The p-value is only useful in the context of knowing like what the r squared is or what the difference in means are. You have to give it context for it to have any kind of reasonable interpretation, and a lot of people just present it on its own, and you're like, no, don't do
Right.
it.
Yes, it's more nuanced than a threshold.
Yeah.
And shout out to Nick Drew who like put those exact two things as his reply in Slido. He said +1 to this topic, especially p-values and or confidence intervals.
That's
They're
great.
so hard. I think that they're hard because if you don't know anything about statistics, you can look at them and just so easily infer something else because those are English words that mean something to everybody. And the things that you think they would mean is not the thing that they mean, right? So it's always tough. In case anybody is a non-statistics person here and hears us talking about this stuff, it can be tricky. I saw lots of shout outs in the chat for this is why I'm Bayesian. So I figured
Yeah,
I would ask
of
you
course,
that question.
yeah, of course.
How
All Bayesian people are like, oh yeah, we recognized that years ago. We don't do that anymore. And I think, that's legitimate. I think that's fine. To be a smug Bayesian, but let's be honest. In the real world, and let's talk about the real world, not this little tiny Bayesian bubble we live in, that where everything is obvious and easy to interpret. In the real world, people are just doing those p-values left and right, and that is the world we actually have to deal with in a practical way. And it's one of the reasons why I'm planning on doing a series on Bayesian statistics because it is awesome and I'm a big fan of it. But it's one of the reasons why I've waited so long to do it. Is, can you do Bayesian statistics in Excel easily? No. Okay, end of discussion. Um,
Accessibility, I guess, is the point there. I have rarely felt like I needed to mute myself because I was in such danger of laughing as when you said smug Bayesians. I'm losing it, y'all. I'm losing it. And we have a consensus in the chat that we would all buy a shirt that says smug Bayesian if it existed. I
And a
feel like
finger pointing to myself.
Mike Smith, please get on this. We need a smug Bayesian shirt. Okay. This is another great question from Satkar. So, Satkar, if you are available to ask this live, I would love it if you did. I'm going to highlight it in Slido so it goes to the top so you can see it and everybody else can see it. But I'm also going to copy this into the chat right now.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Libby. Bam. And I appreciate Josh very much because I think your content actually got me through grad school and I just graduated yesterday. So some
Congrats!
Congratulations.
self-promotion.
Triple bam.
Yeah.
Amazing! Satkar got a triple bam, y'all.
Thank you so much. So my question is like, what would be your advice for a new grad, especially someone without industry experience, to break out as a data science professional, especially since the job market is brutal and competitive right now?
Yeah. Again, I wish I had lots of personal experience that I could reflect and go, oh, I know this works or this doesn't work. I can just tell you what I've heard from other people, which is practice your skills out loud on GitHub. Build a portfolio of data analysis projects. You can get data sets from wherever, and just show that you know what you're talking about. I think I've heard a lot of people say that that's a good thing, and I've talked to some hiring managers that say, yeah, that kind of stuff is impressive. I've also talked to some hiring managers that have said, "Don't worry." They said the one thing they said was, everyone thinks they have to know the latest AI thing these days, and they say that the reality is that it's not like that. The reality it's just like we were talking about with Bayesian versus the real world. Most organizations are doing their statistics and their predictions in Excel, right? They've got a spreadsheet with 2 columns of data, and so they were actually emphasizing that a lot of companies are actually looking for people that are just really solid on more conventional data analysis techniques, and maybe they can use AI tools to work faster, but they're not like putting prompt engineer on their resume or something like that. Or so I don't know if that's helpful or not.
I think it's very helpful, and a lot of people would agree that portfolios are super helpful, but also like hard. If you are struggling with creating a portfolio, I feel you. I do not have one. I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. Everybody chill out in the chat. I'm going to put something in there. Go look at it. This is our survey for the end of the year for the data science community. And one of the questions you wanted to know, which is how I built this survey, is do you have a portfolio? I put a little place in there that's like, yes, I have a portfolio, and here's the link. So I can put a portfolio gallery together so you can see other people's portfolios. Satkar is sharing his portfolio there. Thank you so, so much. Zach says, sorry, we're talking to him today. It's the Josh effect, you guys. But let's be real, we're always wild. Um, so please go take that survey. It's going to take you like 10 to 12 minutes. It's like about 40 questions, depending on how you navigate it. And I wanted to shout out Nathan Jeffrey. He is here. He's a big part of the Data Science Hangout crew, and he helped me make this survey better. If you don't like it, it's my fault, but it's way better than it was when it first started, and that's thanks to Nathan. So thank you so much, Nathan, for your reviews and your help. I am not a survey writer, y'all. I do not like analyzing survey data, but I'm going to do it for you. So we will put out the results to that and have it in the new year. Please stick around and join the Discord server so that you can see the results when they come out. Okay. Thank you so much, Satkar. And let's pivot to Noor because I saw Noor had a question and I would love her to ask it live.
Hello.
There she
Hello.
is.
Hi, long time no see.
Good to see you. Holy smokes. Wow.
Yeah, for very, very, very short context, I worked in when I was in grad school at UNC, I was in like the lab next over from Josh's. So
Right.
when he was like being a rock star and starting his life, I was being a very, very depressed little grad student. But
You made it. You made it. That's the important thing.
I did. Still on the market, but like life works. Life moves on. But yes, this is more of a more generic-ish question, and let me try and dig up said question so I
Oh, I
remember what I
highlighted
said.
it for you, Noor, but I'm also going to stick it in the chat
Thank
right
you,
now.
because I have like 10 windows open. Yes. Okay, we talk a lot about learning out loud, and I'm working on that whole process, but arguably you took it further with the whole act of teaching out loud. And especially because at least when I knew you, I was like, I didn't know a biology postdoc was going to be teaching about stats because when I was at UNC, was one of the people who was often my fellow bio grad students came to me because I was one of the few people who knew what stats was because I came from math and stats background. I was like, we don't do p-values that way. No, that's not how you do it. But how did you took it further with teaching out loud? What are your tips for like generating confidence with that act? When it's like, I do know these things, even though technically formally my background is X per se.
Yeah. Yeah, how do you
Confident.
avoid imposter syndrome is basically.
That's a lot more elegant than what I was saying, actually. Probably more accurate.
Yeah, so one thing that a lot of people assume about me that is not correct is I've actually never taught a course. So I've actually the only teaching I've ever done has been sort of informal, you know, it during a lab meeting when I was at UNC and now making YouTube videos. And occasionally I'll give like a seminar but I've never actually taught a class. And so I've had a lot of imposter syndrome myself, and how did I get it over it very slowly. Um, and I still have it to a certain degree. I actually just had to present basic statistics to the Statistics National Honor Society, and that was one of the most stressful things I've ever done in my whole life because I was not a great statistician. And this is when I was a student and doing statistics, I would have it would have I was like if you told me then like one day you will be inducted into the National Statistics Honor Society, I would have said no. That's impossible. That's you don't know you missed me in another Josh Starmer. And so that was kind of like stressful for me because I think of myself as a statistician, but I fundamentally I think of myself as more of just a computer person. Like I think in terms of programming and iterating and for loops and while loops. And when I think about statistics, I don't think about the theory so much as I think of experiments that I can do to sort of confirm my hunch that this p-value is significant. And so one thing I do, like instead of just like, because a lot of statistics is based on like theory that was developed or at least originally published 100 years ago. And so in 1925, Fisher published this book called like analytical techniques to use with data or something like that. It's got this really generic title, but it introduced basically all of linear models in one book, although it wasn't sort of an overarching like this is linear models. It's a similar thing. He did a terrible job teaching it because he treated each thing as if it was like its own sort of like set of rules. So it's kind of confusing and hard to read for that matter. And actually that set off the tone for how statistics would then teach that subject matter for the next 100 years, which is a horrible thing to have done. But so when I think about statistics, I can look at the theory and I can say, well, without a computer, you'd have to do it this way. And then it's very complicated and you have to do a lot of calculus and it's kind of a nightmare. But then I was like, but computers are so fast nowadays. We can do it. We can actually test the null hypothesis and the frequentist assumptions by just doing tons and tons and tons of these tests and just see what happens. And it's a trick that Bayesian people have been doing for years. And it's like, why aren't frequentists doing the same thing? Like frequentists are kind of smug. They're like, well, we've already done the math 50 years ago, so why would we do it again? But the thing is when you do it, when you test it out yourself, I can feel it. And when I can feel it, I can be confident in it. I'm like, look, I not only does the theory work out the way it's supposed to, but when I wrote this program to like test the null hypothesis the way, and do it a billion times and blah, 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 I got the exact same number. And when I do it that way, I can feel it. And when I can feel it, I feel real comfortable talking about it in front of other people, unless it's the National Statistics Honor Society. And even then my knee will shake.
I like knowing that you get shaky too, because I get shaky every day before the hangout. And there was a question, an anonymous one as well, that was like, do you ever feel cringe? How do you deal with that cringy feeling? It's not exactly imposter syndrome. It's more just like, oh, recording myself is
Yeah, it's
uncomfortable.
embarrassing.
Yeah. Have you just completely gotten over it, or do you still feel it sometimes?
Well, so here's a story, kind of that might sound unrelated, but I'm deathly afraid of snakes. I've always been that way. The snakes just it's just fun. Whenever I see a snake, I have a heart attack. Whenever I see a stick, I
Oh
have a
no.
heart attack. When I see a piece
Oh,
of
no.
rubber on the street, I have a heart attack. I just have heart attacks all the time. Snakes, snakes, snakes. I do not like them. But I once went to a zoo and they said, here's a snake you can hold. It won't bite you. And if it does, don't worry about it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to touch a snake. I'm going to hold it. I'm going to put it in my hands. And I held it with the hope that it would eradicate my fear of snakes. It didn't. Um, I'm still deathly afraid. And I'll be honest, I do these silly songs at the beginning, and every time I do one, I'm completely embarrassed by myself. And they never turn out the way I want. I always come up with different words in advance, and then when I'm doing them, everything gets mungled in my head, and I always mess it up. And I'm always like, oh, I'm always regretting that. But I always try to remind myself that nobody cares about that stuff. What they
No, and in the chat, everyone's saying the songs aren't silly. We love the songs.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is like I have to remind myself that it's like the important thing is that we're having a good time and we're learning something new, and that's what's important. The details of like, oh, I wanted it to be this way and it ended up being slightly different doesn't matter. What does matter is, like I said, yeah, we're having fun, we're learning, and as long as we're doing those things, it's all those little details of like expectations versus reality, none of them matter. And I
Yeah.
just have to remind myself that a million times over and over again. And no matter how many times I do it, like with the silly song, I always have to go, oh, I can't believe I just did that. And I go, look, just, you'll never get over it, but just don't worry about it because that's not important.
Do you think that that is like the career advice that you would give somebody at this point, or do you have anything else in your pocket for career advice that might be good?
Yeah. So I do have career advice. It's not for everyone though. Um, but it's worked for me, which is I always look whenever in every job I've ever had, I've always looked to see what isn't being done that needs to be done. And I've always tried to find those things that nobody's doing that need to be done. And I've done it very successfully in a lot of different um avenues in my life. I've done it with music. I grew up playing the cello and I loved the cello and I wanted to be a classical musician, but I wasn't quite good enough for that. But I was more than good enough for rock and roll. And it turned out that the instrument nobody was playing was the cello. And so that was my way of like looking around and seeing what people are doing and saying, well, what are they not doing? Nobody's playing the cello. So I'll start going up to rock bands and say, hey, do you guys need a cello player? And a lot of them said no, but then one of them said yes. And then we were hugely successful and that was awesome. Likewise, when I worked in the lab, um, one of the things that I could have just done the math and just given people p-values, but instead what I did is I looked around and I said, well, show me how your experiment works. I want to see how it works, and I want to see what's missing. I want to see what details you're telling me and what details you're not telling me about how this is done, so I can get a better sense of what the data are going to be like. And so they would show me stuff, and every now and then I'd be like, "Whoa, what just happened there?" And it's like they're like, "Oh yeah, a lot of stuff happens there." And then they would, I would discover things that they weren't telling me that needed to be corrected for. And so I was always looking for things that were left unspoken that needed to be attended to in some way. And I found that's made me sort of critical in a lot of situations where once sooner or later the organization catches on that to the fact that even though they hired me just to do the data, that I'm actually doing all these other things that are critical to just doing it right and getting stuff published and stuff like that. That they're like, oh, you're very useful. And so I always try to look for the things people aren't saying and the things people aren't doing, as a way, and then trying to focus on those, because it's easier to compete with nobody than it is to compete with everybody.
I love it. And I love the anonymous question that came up that was it's bubbled to the top as well that was like, what are some transferable skills? Like transferable skills come from unexpected places. How have your musical talents helped with your work in data? And I know so many musicians in data.
Yeah. Yeah. So one surprising thing is, with the musical talents um, is I just like being on stage. I'm a performer. And so I take that attitude when I speak in front of people of instead of like holding the microphone all the way down by my belly button and kind of mumbling into it, I get up on the microphone and speak in a commanding way, because I'm comfortable being on stage in front of audiences. And that came from being a musician and came from playing in front of people and sort of putting my heart on my sleeve and saying, okay, I hope you like it. And that's been useful. The other thing that's very useful about music is it's also good for clearing my head. So if I'm stuck on a problem, I can always pick up the ukulele and strum. It's hard to sing and strum and think about math at the exact same time. And so it's a great way of sort of resetting my brain and starting over. And so I use it as a kind of, instead of like doom scrolling, or something like that. I'll do a little silly song about whatever my problem is, or even just whatever I had for lunch.
What a good piece of advice. I think doing anything that is silly and doesn't have a point
Yeah.
is really cathartic for me. And I'm just like, I'm allowing myself to do this. Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
I had a question in the Slido that I lost. Hold on, let me find it. There it is. Let's highlight it so that it goes to the top here. Um, and it was an anonymous question. So thank you, anonymous asker, whoever you are. We have about 8 minutes left. And so I'd like to roll this question into one of my own.
Mhm.
The question is, Josh, if you were building a StatQuest learning system today, how would you integrate AI as a responsible assistant? And where would you forbid it to protect true understanding? So the question that I had was about tools. What tools do you use as far as data tools? Do you work in R? Do you work in Python? What IDEs do you like? If you use coding assistants, like this question is asking about what do you use? Where do you integrate them? So I would love it if you could start with tools, and then I will remind you of the where would you put AI as an assistant and where would you forbid it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I use R all the time, for all of my simulations of p-values and things like that, to make sure that I understand the math. Because it's just so easy. I use Python for doing neural networks. But basically I use R for everything, even just like calculating basic things. And I use R Studio and I use Positron almost daily, both of them. I love notebooks. In general, I just do everything in notebooks these days, unless it's super basic.
What is your notebook of choice?
Oh,
Because I like Google Colab a lot. I work a lot in Quarto. It depends on what I'm doing and who I'm showing how to do stuff.
yeah. So I do. Yeah, exactly. So on my own, I just do everything in sort of like Positron or even just Jupyter, just to just to have it on myself. But I love Google Colab because it actually can do R as well. Like I can do Python,
Yeah.
I can do R in Google Colabs, and then I don't have to worry. It's everything's installed. It's like I can share it with everybody, and to me that's one of my favorite teaching tools ever, because it's instantaneous. it just
Yeah.
works. You can play with it, you can break it, and it never touches the original file unless it's
Yeah, you can literally just type in a cell, pip install something, and it's gonna install it if you need it.
yeah,
It's one of those accessible tools where I can be like, okay, if we're not worrying about installation, I can make this work right now and I can show you how it works. I can share my screen right now. I think that that's fantastic.
yeah,
Also, you can use Google's TPU to run
yeah,
your deep learning models, and they'll run really fast, way
yeah,
faster than they would on your machine. Okay, so let's get to the question
yeah.
that was anonymous, which was, where is AI a beneficial, responsible assistant, and where would you forbid it to protect true understanding to make sure people don't, circumnavigate the learning part?
Yeah. I'm a big fan for using anything you can to write the software. To me, a lot of the understanding doesn't come from writing the software. The understanding comes from interpreting the results correctly. And so if people want to use AI to write their software, great. That just gets it done faster. I mean, make sure you at least can read it and annotate it, like go back and like annotate it or at least read the comments that the AI wrote and make sure it works the way you want it to. But in terms of interpreting the results, I think it's really important to do that yourself, because that's because statistics is the world, the mathematics of the world, because there's variation, because nothing's definitive, because you're looking at probabilities of of ranges of things. Interpretation is really critical and nuanced in a way that AI might be able to do, and it might be able to do well, but if you can't do it yourself, then you don't understand it. And if you don't understand it, then I don't think you can confidently make recommendations to your boss or to other people. I think it's critical that that you're not just a parrot for the AI, because if you are, you're going to get fired right immediately because
Right.
the AI is doing your job, right? So you have to come up with some way to add value to that, and I think the way you do that is understanding all the nuance involved in the decision making that statistics requires you to do.
Absolutely. Fantastic answer. Fantastic question to our anonymous asker. Thank you so much for asking. It clearly spoke to me. And I think that we have to wrap up very soon, but we have maybe like 1 minute left to ask one super quick one. So Arsenis had asked, what is a memorable concept that you remember having a personal aha moment through teaching it or creating content for it? Do you have one?
The very first one for me was R squared. When I
Oh,
could
nice.
visualize it and feel it inside, I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
It's one of my first videos I ever made. It got 9 views in the first year, but for me, it was transformational.
Oh my gosh, you guys, even if you only get 9 views, keep going, keep making your stuff. And if anybody wants any encouragement from me on like, being cringe or doing it scared anyway, listen, I do all kinds of weird stuff on the Hangout live on YouTube. I touch my hair all the time. I think that my voice is ridiculous. Go ahead and do it anyway. And maybe one more, since that one was pretty quick. Is there something that you're just like the most excited for in 2026 since we're at the end of our year?
Yeah, I'm excited about so many things. I got my statistics book coming out in February, which I cannot wait for. I'm so excited.
Yay!
But I'm also excited to kind of like break through free a little bit from doing AI and doing lots of videos on all kinds of like time series, diving into to actually doing time series, but also making videos about
Oh, nice.
getting my hands dirty, but also learning a lot of new things.
Nice. Are you doing the full like super simple rolling averages all the way to Arima, Sarima, Saramax, all of that stuff? What are your favorite time series? Oh, I'm adding questions. Sorry, we have a minute left.
I know what a rolling average is, so we'll start there.
Okay, sorry, we're gonna pivot. Okay. I would love everybody in this last second here. I'm putting it in the chat. Go take our survey. Please,
Oh,
please, 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 so that
oh.
I can
And
give you all the results.
real quick, Josh, somebody said, is there a pre-order link for your book?
Yes,
I wish there
please.
was, but there isn't. So you'll
Okay.
have to keep tabs on LinkedIn. I'll publish it as much as I can bear to do. I'm very shy about that, but I'll try to publicize it. Yeah.
I will put it in the data science hangout channel on the Discord as soon as I see it. I do have your book, but it's on my iPad, so I couldn't bring it to show. Thank you so much for coming, Josh. I hope you had a good time.
It's wonderful. Thank you very much for inviting me. I had a great time.
Oh, we did too. This was super fun. I know everyone, this was not long enough. We needed like a double time hangout. I hope everybody enjoys their holiday if they are taking a break. Don't forget that we do not have a hangout next week or the week of New Year's, but we will see you back in January when we are going to be joined by Adrian Perez, who is the head of people analytics at GitLab, which is super exciting. GitLab is just like the most amazing open company that shares so many good things about the way that they work with the world. So I'm really excited to have Adrian on. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to give you a second here to save the chat if you want to. Top right corner of your chat, there are three dots. You can click those and save the chat so that you can save all of our links that we shared. And you can go find Josh on YouTube to follow him, obviously, and on LinkedIn. All
Thank
right.
you. Hooray.
Love it. Thank you so much, Josh. And thank you, Libby, for everything you do too. Have a great holiday, everybody, and see you next year.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.